I
No.
will never forgive fucking Morgan Freeman for saying, do you remember him saying this, where they
No.
asked him about Black History Month, and they said, so what do you think about Black History Month? He says, I don't think it should exist. I think that Black history is American history. And if we want to solve racism, we got to stop talking about it. And conservatives play this clip every goddamn fucking February. They play it all the time as if, and
You know what?
it's,
I halfway agree with it. Halfway. Hold on. I don't think that, I think the last part that he said makes no sense to me. If we stop talking about it,
oh, that's the part I have the big problem with. Yeah, that's the.
I was like, the first part I agree with. I actually don't like Black History Month because I'm just like,
really?
I feel like I think in a sense it almost like paints you into a corner. It's just like, well, we only talk about Black history during February. I'm just like, we don't need to be in February to be talking about this. Like, why are we waiting until just February? Like, we don't need to. February 28th was yesterday. We're just talking about Black history now. It's like, come on now. Like, I think like that limiting principle to an extent always kind of bothered me a little bit, that we specifically almost like tokenize the month in a way, versus being able to be like, we can talk about Black history in January, July, like October, whatever. Like, we don't got to be just in February to be focusing on all the different elements of history that are tied into Black culture, Black, people, Black achievement. That's the part that I have an issue with, more or less.
So I will have to respectfully disagree on this for two reasons. The first is that highlighting something like basically a holiday, like, for example, like, you ever hear people say that they don't like Valentine's Day because, whoa, you should be in love every day. So I was like,
I'm one of those people. I'm one of those
people.
Well,
okay, well, here's the thing about that is, like, Thanksgiving Day, no one ever says, well, we shouldn't have Thanksgiving. You should be thankful every day. Like, it seems to be very selective when people say this, because
I say that too, but I'm still eating. I'm still eating this.
So yeah, so like, but I mean, holidays exist for that reason, that we have this thing that we do all year round, but we want to celebrate that thing at a particular time. I don't really see the harm in that.
No,
and also because Black History Month isn't like the only history month out there. I mean, there's Italian Heritage Month, there's Irish Heritage Month, there's Native American Heritage Month, there's Asian Heritage Month. So it's like Black History Month is the one that gets the most press, that we talk about the most.
That's true.
But yeah, so it's not like, Black people like are unique in that aspect, and that you can only talk about Native American history in November, which I thought was a bad choice. November, I didn't. It's like for a lot of reasons like that.
So many reasons.
Yeah, but the talking about racism part is the part that really irks me, because when you talk to a conservative, their whole paradigm is that if we stop talking about racism, it wouldn't be a problem anymore, which
wouldn't be a problem for them.
Right. Well, it implies that racism isn't real, because if there's an actual problem, like, let's say I came to you and said, hey, Desmond, I noticed that there's oil leaking from your vehicle. The only way that's a problem is if oil is not leaking from your vehicle. Like, if it is, then it's a conversation we have to talk about. But conservatives, and they're also so goddamn hypocritical with their inability to understand systemic racism. Because when you mention they say that, well, the civil rights era happened, and now there's no law saying that you have to discriminate against Black people. So clearly, it doesn't exist. They seem to understand it pretty damn well whenever they're talking about how Facebook is censoring me. I guarantee Facebook has no rule saying you need to censor conservatives. But they seem to understand that just because it's not explicitly written doesn't mean that, it can be enacted without without referencing, chapter and verse, what happens here. And when you were talking about a lot where these arguments grew, one of my favorite examples of this is George Wallace. So for those of you listening who aren't aware of George Wallace was the governor of, I think, Alabama. Alabama back in the 50s. Correct me if I'm wrong, somebody, but he's the guy that ran on a segregationist ticket in 1968. And he was famous for saying segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. Ran as an explicit segregationist. He won like 3 states. Like, by the way, he won like 3 states. But I saw an interview with him And they asked him, it was on Face the Nation back in the 60s. And they asked him, listen, a lot of people are, bucking against you because you are being called a racist. And he was enraged that people called him a racist. He says, I don't have hate for anyone based on, race or color or creed. And in fact, I'll send you this clip. It's like, in fact, I think the people who call other people racist are the biggest racists. I think the biggest bigots are the people who call other people's bigots. That's the earliest that I can find that statement being made, and it's what and the most famous, like, other than Bull Connor, perhaps the most famous segregationist of the 1960s, said those exact words, and conservatives say it all the time. One more thing I'll add is that George Wallace got like 3% of the black vote. I want to point that out. So, the Candace Owens and
they've always existed.
They've always been with us. So, like, an open segregation. So that's
oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say.
No, so that's where I think it originated.
It's beyond depressing a lot of the times, trying to make heads or tails of all these things going on. One of the things I wanted to kind of mention along these lines is, when it comes to, I've always thought this, just not always, but more recently, it's become apparent to me. What separates somebody from a conservative ideology and from a liberal ideology is, it seems like the common denominator, if you really break it down, is someone's willingness to accept the fact that there's things wrong with the world and wanting to change anything. Like, if you see something wrong in the world and you accept that there's something wrong and you think that it needs to change and you want to be a part of that change, you typically are more liberal. And if you are against changing anything about yourself, like, this is who I am, this is what I want to be, the end, like, don't ever ask me to do anything other than what I want to do, you're probably more or less conservative. And it feels like that's what it boils down to in a lot of these issues. Like, so you have so many people who say things like, I've always been this way, things have always been this way, this is how it used to be, I don't like the fact that things are changing, so I'm not going to change no matter what evidence you present. It doesn't matter what you say, it doesn't matter how many different charts you throw at me, all the different statistics you show, pure evidence right in my face, none of that matters. I don't want to change, the end. And I will find any excuse and any justification that allows me to stay in that mindset, because that's where I want to be. Nothing else matters. And when it comes to racist, like that word in particular, you talked about this before, like, conservatives don't want to admit that they're racist. It feels as though maybe one of the issues that we're having in society, and maybe it's not so much an issue, but that's a separate debate in and of itself, is that everyone has a different definition for the damn word. Especially, and it feels like the more commonly accepted conservative definition of that word is like, well, if I shoot a black person, then I'm a racist. But if I don't shoot black people, if I'm not hanging a black person from a tree, if I'm not owning a black person, then I can't be racist. As if that's where the line just stops. Anything below that, totally not racism.
That's absolutely true. The line for conservatives for like the qualifier, if someone is a racist, is, do they attend actual Klan meetings? Like, that's it. That anything below that, and they're fine. They're just a normal human being. And it is sad. It's unfortunate. I don't know what to do about it either.